This is chapter review for chapter 3. In the textbook, we're on the self-test first, and then on the next page, we will be on the chapter review. So on page 177, self-test, we're doing 1 through 8 and 11 through 13. So we've been all the way through chapter 3. We've gone through some pretty complicated equations and inequalities. So going back here to the basics, be pretty straightforward, pretty easy. So we want to solve this, and we're also going to check it. So to solve it, you're isolating the variable. So we always start with a number that we call the constant, and we leave the coefficient, the number that's attached to your variable, for last. So the minus 5, we want to get rid of it. We get it to 0 by adding 5. And we're left with 4t as the 5s have gone away on the left side of the equation. And 18 on this side, we're going to divide by 4. And when I do 18 divided by 4, it's not going to go in evenly, but it is a nice decimal, 4.5. So we can leave it as 4.5. You could, of course, leave it as a fraction if you wanted to. You would divide this by 2, and you'd end up with 9 over 2, and that'd be perfectly fine. But 4.5, since it's not a rounded decimal, that's good too. All right, for your check, you go back to your original, and you're going to plug in your answer for t. Make sure both sides of the equation actually do come out equal. Always run it through your calculator. Double check yourself, don't assume. So we're going to have 18 minus 5 equals 13. 18 minus 5 is 13. Check works. Therefore, I know 4.5 is correct. Number 2. So for this one, we've got some simplifying to do using the distributive property. 5 times 2 is 10, and 5 times t is 5t. That's your very first step. Now we're ready to go. We're going to go ahead and isolate the variable, so minusing 10 first to get that down to 0, leaving you 5t. This is negative 20. We're going to divide because this says 5 times some number is negative 20, and of course that's negative 4. Going to run a check to the original. 5 times in parentheses 2 plus, plug it in for t, negative 4 equals negative 10. When you run a check, we have all the numbers. We don't need to distribute. You could, but we don't need to. We can go ahead and just follow the order of operations. So 2 plus negative 4 is negative 2. And then multiply, and you get negative 10 equals negative 10. Check works. Therefore, negative 4 is the correct answer. Okay, question number 3. You notice the left side of the equation, it's just 101. That's fully simplified. Right side, we got a bunch that we need to do. So we're going to distribute a negative 2. 13f will just come down. And we're going to get 2 terms here. We need to make sure we're multiplying a negative times a positive, a negative times a positive. So they'll both be negative. So 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 3 is 6, and the f tags along. And then we're going to combine like terms on this side before we start trying to solve the equation. Let's fully simplify the right side. 13 minus 6, that's 7f. The minus 8 drops down. All right, now we're ready to go. So we're going to add 8 to both sides, leaving me 7f. And we're going to divide by 7. And we're going to get a nasty decimal. Okay, and we're not going to round it. So we're going to leave this as a fraction. If you wanted to see if this simplified at all, pull up your fraction, 109 over 7, and hit enter, and you can see it is fully simplified. And that's going to be our final answer here. All right, so we're going to run a check, and that's not going to be a lot of fun, trying to use that fraction, but let's see what happens. So 101 equals 13 times 109 over 7 minus 2, and then in parentheses 4 plus 3 times 109 over 7. So order of operations is going to tell me that I need to do the inside of parentheses first. So just kind of looking at this as an overview before we jump in, I need to complete the inside of parentheses, which is going to be multiplication first and then adding. And then I'm going to multiply here, and then the very last thing I'm going to do is combine all that. So I'm going to leave this alone for a second. And this. Let's just solve in here. So we're going to do 3 times our fraction, 109 over 7. It's 327 over 7, and we're going to add 4. So 355 over 7. So again, kind of a nasty check here, but it should all work out if our answer is correct. So we got to multiply here, and then we will combine those two together. So 13 times 109 over 7. It's that. And then I'm going to count this as a negative times a positive, so it will be minus because it's a negative. 2 times 355 over 7. And now I'm going to go ahead and combine these two. So as a fraction, we have 114/17 over 7. And we're going to subtract 710 over 7. And sure enough, it all ends up being 101 in the end. So our check works, and we are good to go. Okay, number 4, solving the inequality. No checks here. So when you solve an inequality, all you have to worry about is, do you flip or do you not flip? So first thing we're going to do is simplify, distribute. So 3x minus 12. We're going to try and isolate this x, so we're going to add 12 to both sides. So I'm going to get 3x greater than or equal to 24 divided by 3. And I divided by a positive, so there's no flip. X is now isolated. It stays greater than or equal to, and it is 8. Number 5. So we're going to isolate the variable. We're going to minus 14 first. We get 5x less than negative 40. Divide by 5. Now there's a negative in this problem, but I'm not dividing by a negative. Therefore, we are not going to flip anything, and it is negative 8. Okay, number 6. 26 minus 2x greater than 10. So we want to isolate this variable. We're going to get rid of the 26. There's a minus. It's with the 2, not the 26. Positive 26. How do I get that to 0? I'm minus 26. So I've got negative 2x. And this is negative 16. Now I'm going to divide by negative 2 to get rid of it. If I just divided by 2, the negative would stay. So I want to get rid of it. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1, for a 1x. And because I divided by a negative, here's where you have to flip. So this becomes a less than. Negative and a negative makes a positive 8. So x is less than 8. So grabbing my last couple problems here, I'm going to need them for question number 7. So A, B, and C. So I'm going to go ahead and match these graphs with my answers. So I have x greater than or equal to 8, x is less than negative 8, and x is less than 8. So the only one of these is a negative 8, and so I can go ahead and find that right here. So 7C is going to be question 5. Letter A, I notice, is open, so it's not going to have an equal sign, and it goes down. So it should be less than, and it should be open. That would be this one right here. That's question 6. That means B's got to be question number 4. If you take a look, it's closed in, which means it has the equal sign. It says x is greater than 8 going up. All right. And question 8. So we're going to clear out some fractions here. Our two denominators are 4 and 8. You could multiply them together and use 32, but the number we multiply by has to be at least the size of the biggest denominator, so you can't use 4. And it has to be a number that both of them fit into. So 8 would be the smallest number. 16 would also work. So would 24, 32, any of those. Yeah, but the smallest number that both 4 and 8 fit into is 8. So to keep things simple, that's what I'm going to use. But all of them, again, will work. The big mistake here is everyone forgets to multiply the whole number by 8. So I'm going to do that first so I don't forget. 8 times 3 is 24. Now, when I come over here to the fractions, if it's the same denominator in terms of what I'm multiplying by, the 8 and the 8, they will cancel because I'm basically dividing. 8 divided by 8 is 1. So they cancel, and that just leaves me a minus n. Now, it doesn't happen when I have a different denominator here, so I'm actually dividing. This is 8 over 4, which is 2, and that gets combined here and multiplied to 2n. This simplifies down. 2n minus a 1n is just an n. And at that point, I have isolated my variable, and I have an answer. N equals 24. Okay, number 11. So for 11 through 13, we're going to use this situation. And if you just look ahead, we're going to make a table, we're going to make a graph, and then we're going to answer the question. Okay, so number 11, let's talk about the situation first. Allison has $350 in her checking account. That's what she starts with. She withdraws, so takes out $20 each month to pay for school, her lunch ticket. And we're going to use M for months. After M months, she has T equals 350 minus 20M. So here's the 350 you started with. You're minusing 20 every month, so you plug in however many months it's been. 350 minus that amount equals T. T is going to represent your total amount of money in that checking account. So starting with 11, we're going to plug numbers in for M. And we're going to go ahead and talk about how much money is left in the account. You could call that T. You could also just write out the expression and put that up there. We're going to do 0 months. It doesn't tell you how far to go, so we'll go 3 months in. So starting at 0 months, there is $350 in that account. That's what you started with. After 1 month, 20 comes out, so that's 330. Another 20 comes out, that's 310. Another 20 comes out, that's 290. And I'm going to go to number 12. Make a graph from your table. So time goes across the bottom. So we're going to start with 0, 1, 2, 3. And we got to start with 350. So I'm going to count by hundreds. So at 0, we're at 350, right between 300 and 400. At 1, we're at 330. And at 2, we're at 310, so still above the 300 line. And by 3, we are underneath the 300 line. And you can kind of project out it's going to keep going down like this. Now, we wouldn't connect this because she's not gradually taking money out like every single day, right? She's just once a week, or once a month, I should say, taking money out. So it jumps. We don't want to connect these lines. There's nothing happening in between. Okay, it's just once per month that money comes out. So that's number 12. How about 13? We're going to go ahead and find out when is she going to have 190. So this represents T, right? Not M, not 190 months, the dollar amount. So we can go back to our original equation here. T equals 350 minus 20M. We're going to try and find out the number of months. That's not what we have. We have t, which is the total amount. They've given you t equals 190. We want to find out how many months. When will she have it? So we're just going to solve this equation, isolate that variable, so minus 350. Bring this down, it's going to be a negative 20m. So 190 minus 350 is negative 160. Isolate that variable, so divide. It's a negative divided by a negative. That's positive 8. So it's when m equals 8. So after 8 months, she will have $190. All right, so that was all of the self-test. Moving on to the chapter review. So we're on page 178. And we're going to do 8 through 16 and 29 to 35. And we're not going to do any checks on this page. You can always do the checks. It's always a good idea, especially on a test, and you know you got it right. But it is not required in this assignment. All right, so back to some equation work. You notice I skipped over some of the basic ones, so we'll just work with some fractions and we'll work with some extra simplifying here. So I'm going to distribute 6 plus 3x, bring everything else down. I'm going to leave this side for a second. I got to put these together. That's 5x plus 6. Now I fully simplified this side. Now I go ahead, bring that down, and solve this. Minus 6. So I get 15 equals 5x. Divide by 5. And x equals 3. Okay, number 9. So we have a fraction here. If you want to clear out your fraction, you could multiply everything by 3. Okay, make sure you multiply the whole numbers. But I'm going to leave it for now. It's only right here, which isn't going to give me any trouble because that's a coefficient. So in the end, I can divide by 2/3 or multiply by 3/2 and get my answer. So I'm going to do it that way. But you could clear this out by multiplying everything by 3. That would work. I'm going to minus 14 here. Bring it down. 2/3 z equals negative 10. Now you either divide both sides by 2/3 or you multiply by the reciprocal. So this will be 6 over 6, which is 1, which is z. This is a negative times a positive, so it's negative. And now one quick way to work with fractions like this in your head, even if you weren't going to use a calculator, you're just going to multiply across the top and then divide by the bottom. Because across the top we're going to get 30, and on the bottom we're going to get 2. So you're going to get 30 over 2, which is 15. So z equals negative 15. Of course, you can use your calculator there as well. But it's good practice to see, can you do it without the calculator? Similar problem here on number 10. So for this one, if you wanted to, you could multiply everything by 4, clear out the fractions and solve it like normal. I'm just going to solve it. So I'm left with 3/4 x equals negative 6 times by the reciprocal. Clear out this fraction because you end up with 12 over 12, which is a 1x. Whole number times a fraction, you multiply it times the top, divide by the bottom. So negative times a positive is a negative, and it's 6 times 4 is 24, divided by 3 is 8, so x equals negative 8. So number 11 just has a bunch of simplifying we got to do. We're going to distribute 3w plus 12. This is a negative we have to distribute, so negative 8w. And this is a negative times a negative, so that's positive 8. Still not done with this left side. Let's combine like terms. This is a 3 and a negative 8. Make sure that you are minusing 3 minus 8. So that's negative 5w. 12 and 8 both positive. Put them together, that's 20. And so we're going to minus 20. So we get negative 5w, negative 13, divide by my negative 5 to clear it out. That will make a positive. And 13 divided by 5 actually gives you a nice decimal of 2.6. And it's positive again because of a negative and a negative. And so we're all set. Okay, number 12. Here's one we probably want to clear out the fractions. So we have 11 and a 5. You could start counting by 11, 22, 33, 44. 55 is going to be the number, and you can actually get that just by multiplying them together. And remember, that's always a good strategy. You can't think of a number that they both fit into. Just multiply them together, and they both go into that number. So 11 times 5 is 55. We're going to go ahead and distribute that, make sure it goes to everything. So when I bring it over here, I'm dividing by the 5. Whatever's left over goes to the top. So 55 divided by 5 is 11, times n is 11n. 55 divided by 11 is 5 times the top. 5 times 2 would be minus 10n. And 55 times 6 is 330. The left side will simplify real nice here for us. 11n minus 10n is just n. And there's nothing more to do once you have the variable isolated. So our final answer is n equals 330. Right here it says solve and check the inequality. Again, we're not going to do any checks, but you could do these checks. Remember, there's two checks for these. One, you plug in your actual number that you've gotten, which is called your boundary point, and you make it an equal sign, solve it, make sure both sides come out equal. And then you also want to check your inequality. So you go back to the original with the less than or with the greater than, and you plug a number, not the one that you got as a boundary point, but one that you believe is in the solution set in, and you make sure it comes out to a true statement. But in this assignment, we don't have to do that. So let's just run through these real fast. Minus 11. It's just like solving an equation. All we have to do is just make sure if there's division by a negative or multiplying by a negative, we are going to flip, but there's no negatives here. So we're not flipping anything. So x is less than 188 divided by 294. Okay, 14. Let's simplify this side. That's a negative 3 and a 6. That's a positive 3. So it's d plus 3 is less than 4. Real easy to solve from that point. We're going to minus the 3 from both sides. So d is less than 1. Done. All right, negative 28 less than or equal to 18 minus 3y minus 7. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and simplify the right side. So I have 18 minus 7. So that's going to be 11. I'm going to put the y in front, negative 3y. That's a positive 11, so plus 11. You could put it in the front and do 11 minus 3y. It says the same thing. So at this point now I'm going to minus the 11. And now I need to divide by a negative 3, and that's when my alarms need to start going off in my head. I'm dividing by a negative, so I need to make sure I flip this. I'm going to leave y on the right side. I'm going to flip this the other way, and when I divide this, I get a positive 13. So this is the answer. Y is less than 13. You read it from the variable. If you want to write it the other way, it would look like this. You need to make sure that if it's closed towards the y on this side, if you put the y on the other side, it still remains closed towards it. So y is less than or equal to 13. Okay, moving on to number 16. Looking at the right side of the inequality, I can combine here. So I have a negative 16 plus a 7. So that's a negative 9. So I have negative 9t plus 5. Just looking ahead, That's a negative coefficient. I will need to divide by a negative to get rid of it at the end, so I need to remind myself to flip when I get there. So first I'm going to minus 5 to get rid of this. So I have negative 9t. I haven't divided by a negative yet, so don't flip. 4 minus 5 is negative 1. I'm dividing by the negative 9 now. And so this needs to flip. So I'm going to leave t here. I'm going to flip it this way. Two negatives make a positive. Not going to be a nice decimal, so I'm going to leave it as 1/9. So t is less than 1/9, reading it from the variable across. If you want to rewrite it, t is less than 1/9. Looks like this. It was closed towards the t. Make sure it stays closed towards the t. All right, after 16, we're jumping all the way to 29. So we got some word problems here to finish this assignment off. The tree now has a trunk with a radius of 12 centimeters. That's your starting point. The radius is increasing by 0.5 per year. And after x years, it's described by this equation. So y equals 12 plus 0.5x. We're going to first make a table. All right, so we're going to do years and radius. So after 0 years, we know it's a radius of 12. After 1 year, it's increasing by 0.5, so that's 12.5. 2 years, add another 0.5, that's 13. 3 years, that's 13.5. 4 years, 14. Okay, part B, go ahead and make a graph based on your table. So the bottom is going to be your years. You want to see time passing by. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to start at 12 and go up. So I'm going to call this, let's see, I'll call this 6, 12, 18. That's a little fancy. You could just go 5, 10, or you could even go 10, 20, but then they're going to be kind of scrunched together. So I try to spread it out a little bit. So at 0, we are right at the 12. At 1, 12 and a half. 2, 13, 3, 13 and a half, 4, 14, and it's going to just slowly go up. Now this, it's growing in between these. It doesn't jump up at the year. It's growing, so we can connect this, and it will continue to grow. So we can put an arrow on the end of it. All right, now let's answer some questions. Let us see, how many years will it take for the tree trunk to reach a radius of 15 centimeters? So we could just continue this table. 5 would be 14.5, and 6 would be 15. So 6 years is the answer to that question. And then letter D, what will the radius be in 8 years? So let's go ahead and grab the equation. You could just continue down, of course, but let's do it differently. So it's a little confusing because you might want to plug years in for y. But if you go back, the radius is y, x is the years, because 0.5 is how much is growing per year. So we want to know what's the radius going to be in 8 years. So you're actually plugging 8 in for x. So it's 0.5 times 8. Well, 0.5 is a half, so times 8 is 4. So 12 plus 4 is going to equal 16. Now again, you could have gone 7, 8, and this would have been 15.5, and this would have been 16, and there's your answer right there. So you can use the table, the graph, the equation. We want to be able to use all of those different tools to get us to our final answer. All right, number 30. We have a drought. There's a river starting at 6.1 feet, and it's dropping 0.2 per week. So we're going to have to write the equation. They're not giving it to us. So y is going to be the level of the river. So y equals, x is your weeks. So it goes down 0.2 for every week. So it's going to be 0.2 times x. It's starting at 6.1, and it's dropping, so minusing 0.02 for every week. So there's our equation. That's letter A. We're going to make a table of values here. So just make an x and a y. X is the number of weeks, so 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. At 0 weeks, we know it's at 6.1, and now it's going down by 0.2. So take 0.2 off of that, that's 5.9. Take 0.2 off, that's 5.7, 5.5, 5.3. That's part B. Part C, just go ahead and make a graph. Again, time across the bottom. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if you take a look, we don't want to spread this out too much. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. At 0, it's at 6.1. At 1, it's at 5.9. 2, 5.7. 3, 5.5. Should be right between the 5 and the 6 at that point. 5.3. And again, it's going to keep going down. Now we are talking about water dropping, so it doesn't just drop, drop, drop. It's gradual, so we can connect this. There's things happening in between the weeks, right, every day. So we can definitely connect this, and it will continue to drop, so we'll put an arrow on the end of it. Okay, 31. $55 in the bank and adding 20 per week. So as an expression, that's 55 plus 20 per week. Now it says B is the balance, W is the week. So 20 per week instead of an X, I'm going to put W for weeks. I want you to write an equation. So B is your balance. Your balance equals 55 plus 20 per week. So there's letter A. Letter B, let's make a table of values. So we've got our weeks, and for every week we're going to have a balance. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. At week 0, you're starting with 55. And you're adding 20 every week. So 75, 95, 115, 135. Letter C, make a graph. So again, time on the bottom. Weeks, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to count by 50s here. 50, 100, 150. So week 0, we're at 55. In week 1, we're at 75, which should be right between 50 and 100. 2, we're at 95, almost at 100. 3, we're above 100 at 115. And then at 4, we're at 135. Now, he's just adding this in. He's not gradually gaining money. It's put 20 in, put 20 in, put 20 in. So we can't connect these dots. There's nothing happening in between the weeks. It's not putting a little bit in every single day. It's not gradually growing because of interest or anything like that. It's here, and he adds 20, adds 20, adds 20, adds 20. So we are not going to connect these dots. These are one-time occurrences at each week. Okay, and then letter D, when will we have 175 in the bank? So you could use your table or your equation or your graph. I'm going to go ahead and use the equation. So we want to know when is his balance, or B, 175. So I'm going to plug that right into the equation. I'm going to change the B into 175, and I'm going to solve for the number of weeks. So minus 55. So that is 120. Divide by 20. So W equals 6. So that would be 6 weeks. And you could have done it here. You could have added here. So 155. Week 6 would be 175. So there's your answer right there. Solve the equation, plugging in 175. Or you could have continued your graph as well, although that's not as accurate because we're just sketching it. But if we had a very accurate graph, you could just continue to follow the graph until it hit 175. So lots of different options there. All right, we're almost done here. Through the word problems, these last couple here, we're just going to graph the solutions. So making sure we can put these on a number line. So x greater than or equal to negative 4.3. So we're going to graph that. So here's 0. Here's negative 4.3. Circle goes right on the boundary point. Fill it in because there's an equal sign. We're going to shade x. We're going to shade the solutions. So all of the solutions are x is greater than, which is this direction, and goes on forever, so I need an arrow. 33, D is less than 3.5, which is 3.5. Here's 0, positive 3.5 right here. Circle on the boundary point, not filled in because it's not an equal sign. Shading in letter D and all the solutions. The solutions are less than, so all the numbers less than. Okay, for 34, before we graph it, we actually have to solve this. So first thing I'm going to do is minus 5. That leaves me negative a, negative 3. Now I can't leave this as negative a. I need to divide by negative 1 to create a positive a. And when I do that, this flips, because when you divide by negative, this flips. So a is less than, and a negative is a positive. I can rewrite this if I want. A is less than 3. Read it from the variable. It's closed towards the variable. So a is less than. Our solutions are less than 3. So if I put this on a number line, here's 0, here's 3. Circle on the boundary point. It is not equal to, so I leave it open. And again, it's closed towards the variable. So all of my solutions are less than 3. And 35. Solve it first. Minus 6. Divide by 4. I'm dividing by a positive number. I know there's a negative 8 here, but I'm dividing by a positive, so this will not flip. So m is greater than negative 2. Just need to put that on the graph. Here's 0. Here's negative 2. Circle on the boundary point. Do not fill it in. There's no equal sign. Shade m, which is all the solutions, and they are greater than negative 2. So all the numbers greater than negative 2 are up here.